matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you.
And we are back, Taylor, live. Several days have passed. How are you feeling today?
Good. I haven't moved. I'm doing this one laying on a bed.
You
So,
are very stationary. I was wondering if there was something wrong with you, and then I realized that you're just don't have your camera on, and so that's why you're not moving. So
yeah, I'm in vacation mode.
love it, love it.
Hmm.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce us so I remember to ask you to introduce us?
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We bring you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, and I am Taylor, as always, joined by Fars.
I'm Fars, and I have a topic today that I think Taylor's going to have feelings about, and I think a lot of people are going to have feelings about it because I'm approaching a subject anecdotally from the perspective of everybody calm down, chill out, like let's like cool our jets a little bit and stop trying to identify enemies and start trying to identify solutions. That's where my headspace is at today. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm moving my hands a lot. You won't be able to see it, but my hands are moving a lot.
I can feel it. I can feel the vibe.
So I mentioned in an earlier episode a book, which I have not read, but I will. I am going to get this book. I will buy it because I owe it to the authors to pay them for how much they've informed me. The perennial star of my episodes of this show is consistently Ezra Klein, who I think is probably the smartest person ever, and his perspectives are amazing. Anyways, he recently released a book, I think like 2 weeks ago, with his co-author, a guy named Derek Thompson, and the book is called Abundance. He released a book every his last one is Why We're Polarized, and I think that was like in 2018 or something. So like he does not publish a lot, but when he does, it's always a banger. And so my topic today kind of comes a little bit from the book Abundance. And I'll just debrief what the book is essentially about. Basically, in it, they talk about government inefficiencies and why things are the way they are and why people should stop making this like a left-right thing and think about like, hey, a government that works for people is actually a good thing. And he gives all these anecdotal examples. He aims triple barrels at California and New York specifically. And I'm going to actually do the same as it relates to California in my episode. And I haven't even got to the topic yet, but that's where this is headed. I also love this one YouTube channel. It's really like, it's like an adults only channel. It's called The Soft White Underbelly. Have you ever seen that?
Mm-mm.
So it's this guy, his name's Mark Leda. He is like a retired something, and he started doing photography things around downtown LA, around Skid Row, and then he got an office there, and he'd bring people in and put them in front of a camera and just tell me your story, like why is your life the way that it is. So think about like prostitutes, homeless people, I mean, you name it, like whatever, like it is the parts of society that we never want to like actually look at. And he shines a glaring light on it, and it's incredibly informative. It's really hard to listen to a lot of times. So like it's not like a feel good, I'm gonna sit and listen to this. It's more like okay, I should probably know why this person ended up the way they are. So that's what that is. But one of his most recent interviews was with a psychiatrist named Dr. Tori Seppa, who is she works for the LA County prison system. And in it, she talks about the state of mental health within the prison system, with the grossest examples that she literally saw in real life was 3 prisoners ripping out their eyes and ingesting them.
You've said so much so far that
I
my
haven't
brain
even
is
started.
like, what are you talking about? Keep going.
I haven't even started.
No, I know.
And it was the way she came across in the video was just like, I don't want to say defeated because it was like honorable what she was doing for a living, but it was just like, guys, nothing is working. Like this doesn't work. What we're doing is not working. And she brought up the fact that basically prisons are now basically just giant mental health facilities and their inability to provide mental health treatments. And I kind of went back and was like batting around the Ezra Klein abundance concept and was like, oh, I want to figure out like why this happened and if it can be fixed or how it can be fixed. And so I am going to talk about why we ended up this way. How did we end up with people having mental disabilities roaming the streets, roaming prisons, and not getting the treatment that they deserve.
Is it Ronald Reagan?
So this is the part where you're gonna like not be happy about this because also Ezra Klein said something amazing in his last episode with Jon Stewart where he was like the villain we're quicker to ascribe blame when the villain looks the way we think they look as
Hmm.
opposed to digging a layer deeper and figuring out what the root of it was. And so Reagan's going to star in this episode, but it's not going to be like a complete takedown of Reagan. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
So, I'm going to start the story in the 1940s and the end of World War II. So, prior to that time, these institutions were referred to as lunatic asylums,
Hmm.
and they are not what you would think of today as a psychiatric ward in like a mental health hospital. This was where you would take children with mental disabilities. Alcoholics would end up here. Obviously, people with like mental illness, actual mental illness, would also end up here. But
Hmm.
it was essentially the seventh circle of hell.
Yeah.
That's what it was. But after World War II, many GIs returning home suffered the trauma of war, and the mental impact that they suffered also timeline wise dovetailed into medical advancements in pharmaceutical drugs. And the 1940s was also when the conditions within lunatic asylums, that's what they're called. I'm not being obtuse about it. That's when those places were actually being reported about. People were like, what is actually going on behind those walls? We haven't
Hmm.
seen Johnny playing in the yard for like 20 years. Like, where would he go? What's happening to
Right.
him?
They just dropped him off in like a
Yeah, Rosemary
place.
Kennedy. That's exactly what the
Yeah.
Kennedys did.
Hmm.
So the prevailing theory on mental health back in the day, and I'm using mental health like broadly here. Like I said, this also applies to people who actually have like disabilities, right? Like it's not
Right.
just that. But their perspective of it was that mental health, quote unquote, was immutable and pretty much like untreatable. It was the idea.
Hmm.
So mental institutions developed into human warehouses where the worst conditions were starting to get exposed by journalists. Specifically, a guy named Albert Deutsch wrote The Shame of the States in 1948. And right before that, Life magazine um, had a photo essay that they published called Bedlam. And when you see pictures, it's like, it's horrible. It's, you
Hmm.
can't imagine people were treated the way they were being treated. Um, so these things, along with a number of other reports about conditions of these places, along with the advancement of drugs to treat psychosis, they started shifting public perception away from housing people in mental asylums to more community-oriented approaches. That was supposed to be the answer to what this was.
Hmm.
Asylums during this time were still around as this approach kind of started gaining speed. So the idea was that if you create these localized community health centers, and now we have pharmaceuticals, things like Thorazine that people can go in and take. They can get a mental health evaluation. They can get tied to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then come back and repeat the cycle. Then that would probably lead to better outcomes than just housing someone in a mental asylum away from their family, their friends, their life, and everything else, right?
Hmm.
And things kind of stayed that way, dual track, where in some cases where someone's just like unmanageable and there's no hope whatsoever, you just dropped them off at a mental institution, you involuntarily committed them. And the idea was just out of sight, out of mind. And the other side of it was, you know, you would treat them through these community health approaches.
Hmm.
Um, the one point there that's really important to say is the involuntary commitment piece. Like that was real. Like that was where women with postpartum depression, their husbands would just drop them
Hmm.
off at a mental health asylum and say, "Just keep her. I don't give a shit." Like I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like you have no rights at that point. Which dovetails into other parts of American culture that we're going to happen here in a little bit. We'll discuss. So think about what type of person is the one that ends up in a mental asylum versus the one that has the resources in the community and the household environment that would nurture them going into a clinic with arguably dramatically better healthcare outcomes, right? It's
Hmm.
very clearly you're dealing with like I don't want to be rude about it, but you're dealing with the dredges of society getting dropped off and shipped off and nobody cares about them versus like it's your kid and you love them and you want to take care of them, so you're going to make sure that they get the treatment they deserve and they want and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of the two-track approach that the US had. I wrote down that Rosemary Kennedy was the anomaly here because she did come from a really big resource intensive family and they still were
Mm-hmm.
like, just drop her off. Like,
I
just
mean, they
serve her.
lobotomized her
They
also.
lobotomized her too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was a lot going on with that family at that
She
time.
did she did live a long time, but
She did live a long time.
Lord knows, yeah.
So we're talking like the 1940s, and now we're heading into the 1960s, and this is when the a wave of reforms start coming down the pike as well. So conditions within state-run asylums were regularly being reported on. Geraldo Rivera famously did this. Titicaca
Hmm.
Follies notoriously did this. It's a documentary, Titicaca Follies, if anybody wants to check it out. And it's terrifying. It's really, really scary. It's very, very like you don't want to be there. And California had an especially bad rap with these kinds of asylums. You had Napa State Hospital, which was one of the largest and oldest, but it was overcrowded, super chaotic. And it was reports in the mid 20th century describing it as a dumping ground for people with mental illness, developmental disabilities, and the elderly. You
Jeez.
have Camarillo State Hospital, known for housing both mentally ill and developmentally disabled patients. This was kind of the emblematic out of sight, out of mind approach to care. And in fact, the Eagles song, Hotel California, was apparently based on this mental institution.
Oh, that is not what I thought that song was about.
Yeah. Well, it
Interesting.
stands. I mean that's this is the involuntary commitment part. You can never
Yeah, I get it
leave.
now. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
makes
makes it
sense.
so much darker. When I read that, I was like, that is so much worse than I thought that was.
Yeah, that was like a beach resort where you kind of
I
get
know.
to
I thought it was
stay,
gonna be like a
you
sexy
know?
beach resort. Like, hey, I kind of want to see my family, but I kind of want to have margaritas and have a siesta. Like, but then they put it in
Mm-hmm,
this
mm-hmm.
context. Then you have Agnew State Hospital in San Jose, which was originally named, this is all capitalized as a proper noun here, proper name, the Great Asylum for the Insane. And that was obviously well known for neglect and warehousing. Over 100 patients died in the 1960s when an earthquake struck nearby, and was also well known for its
Oh
poor
God.
safety standards in construction.
Mm-hmm.
You had Patton State Hospital, which it was historically a high security psychiatric treatment center that was known for inhumane treatments. And it was usually used for people who were deemed criminally insane or unfit to stand trial, one of which I'm going to get to here in a little bit later in the story. And this is where everything goes to hell in a handbasket with why the state of mental health in our communities is the way that it currently is. And it all starts in California. In 1966, the Democratic governor of California was Pat Brown. The name sound familiar?
No, no, but I feel like you're gonna tell me I'm gonna be like, duh.
Because his son was our governor when we were living in California, Jerry.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. So yeah, in 1966. So he was governor of California, and he decided to run for. This just blew my mind when I read this. He explicitly said that he was a two-term governor. He just wanted to get in, fix stuff, and bounce. Then
Mm-hmm.
it comes up to his election in '66. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go for a third term.
Oh, that's unprecedented.
I know later on I wrote down for anyone wondering why I'm negative on things changing with the Democratic Party, you can draw your own inferences here.
Yeah.
But we'll leave it at that for the time being. But um, during his second term in office, towards the end of his second term in office, he worked with a Republican assemblyman named Frank Latterman and Democratic senators Nicholas Petris and Alan Short to draft the Latterman-Petris-Short Act, LPS for short, which would change how California managed the mentally ill population by forcing judicial reviews of individual commitments and critically here, ending indefinite and involuntary commitments for all but the most extreme cases.
Okay.
And the idea was to his intention around this was naturally this would defund these institutions, but
Mm-hmm.
the bill itself wasn't a funding bill. It was just a procedural bill of like from now on, like these things can't be run amok. You can't just drop off your kid or your wife or whatever these things and leave them there forever indefinitely. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually done with well intentions. And the reason was that starting in the 40s, the world had kind of seen that, hey, these localized mental health facilities and clinics within communities is probably a better way to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to this, this was all done in like the late 60s. This was done during the civil rights era. So this was also like a civil rights protection bill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how Pat Brown saw it. And he also thought that from a funding perspective, the fact that it's not being like funded directly through the state wasn't a huge deal because JFK had just signed into law the Community Mental Health Centers Act. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. The monkey in the wrench that happened here was that, again, nobody was happy that Brown, after saying he was going to run 2 terms, ran for a third, and he got completely whipped in the
Ugh.
66 election by Ronald
Mm-hmm.
Reagan, who won the governorship of California and was sworn into office in 1967. Reagan signs the LPS into law that was developed under Pat Brown, and then several factors converged that prevented the intent of the law from taking place. So, first things first, without involuntary commitments, mental asylum patients dropped. Like, you have
Right.
less patients, you have less costs. The asylum's huge and needs people to operate to get funding, and the funding
Mm-hmm.
dried up. Next, Reagan wanted to cut the state budget anyways. In addition, the plan was always that, like I said, JFK's Mental Health Center Act would provide federal funding for these community health centers. The part of this that he did not want to get involved in, the part that Reagan did not want to get involved in, was direct government oversight into these development of these community health centers. So budget was going to come from the JFK bill, and it was going to come from the states. But the state was like under Reagan was like, hey, why don't y'all run it? Like, why don't you, the communities, actually run your own programs? So they issued block grants to counties and had them be in charge of developing their own community centers, being like, hey, part of the funding will come from these block grants, part of it will come from the federal government. Are you,
It's
do
so
you,
interesting that JFK signed that and like never visited Rosemary.
he did visit Rosemary.
Did he?
Yeah, he visited Rosemary right before before he was gonna announce for office. And then he was like, wait, I'm running for office, and like you are now telling me my sister's been lobotomized.
But he didn't know until then,
He didn't know
right?
until then. He didn't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's like because it wasn't like they knew it was like
Yeah, it's an
Rosemary's
Irish
gone.
secret. Yeah, it's an Irish secret. Like it's like if your kid gets pregnant at like 16, nobody asks questions when she's not seen for like a year. Like it's
Yeah,
just she's gone. Like
yeah, yeah.
so the way block grants works is that this is funding. Usually it's I mean, the way it's kind of talked about these days, you hear it mostly from the federal government, but it's like any government can do this. In this case, it's a state government issuing a grant saying, here's a batch of funds that can be used for this purpose. Use it for this purpose, essentially.
Hmm.
But shockingly to no one, even back then, government could barely function. So, what hope did counties have with their limited resources to in staff and expertise to develop these community centers that are like super detail oriented and intricate and they're
Hmm.
resource intensive and mental health is it's still confusing. How confusing was it back then?
Hmm.
Third, JFK's act was supposed to provide funding for 2,000 community health clinics across the country. And then something else happened that kind of blew this into the background. Can you guess what could have happened around this time?
Is that when he died?
No. Well, that you would think that would be more important than it was, but that actually wasn't the thing. The thing was the Vietnam War.
Okay.
So the Vietnam War grew to become huge, like a huge albatross around the government's neck when it came to social pressures and budgetary issues. Basically, domestic spending across the board was reduced to fund the war. I guess like back then we didn't go into like massive debt for everything, and we actually like self-funded stuff, which is like a crazy
Hmm.
concept.
Hmm.
Um, and all political capital that anybody in the federal government had was being used to focus on keeping Americans from mass revolt, from their kids being drafted to be shot in the forests of
I mean,
Vietnam.
I've been thinking about that a lot, like giving some credit to my parents and other people of their age group because, like, yeah, when they were in college, a bunch of their friends were everyone, my dad was drafted, but he had a knee injury and couldn't go. But like, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
If you're the,
dude,
you know,
if you were to
that's
draft me right now, I'd shoot myself in the neck just to get out of going. Like,
well, you're too old. You're not going. But
hey, I'm not that old. I'm still spry. Okay.
you're too old to be drafted. This isn't like the end of a siege. If it's like the last couple days of a siege, then they're like all men over 40 and 8-year-olds are going to be the ones who are fighting at the gates. But I think you're fine.
I'll be the shoe buff boy. Um, so because of the state of things in the U.S. this time, mental health reform was like an orphan. Like nobody gave a shit. Like it
Right.
was the last item on the list that anybody cared about.
Hmm.
So that funding never came from the federal government. Mental asylums lost funding, which like probably they should have because they were run horribly and they horribly misabused.
Right. But then what do you do with the people?
Yeah, and then county
Right.
governments, like I said, they were ill-equipped to provide the community-focused alternatives themselves.
Hmm.
So by 1981, well after Kennedy signed the act and was shot in the head, the U.S. went through LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter. In total, across all these presidents, less than half of the community centers that they had said they were going to build were built. About 780 of these centers were built, and they were all poorly built because all the funding was kind of dried up anyways.
Hmm.
The term used for transitioning away from mental institutions to these community centers is called deinstitutionalization.
Hmm.
And it's been said that Reagan, when he took office in 1981, he didn't start deinstitutionalization. He just inherited it and ensured
Right.
that it would fail by cutting further federal funding back that had already been declining for 15, 20 years at this point.
Hmm.
So the outcome of this has been jails and prisons taking over the mantle of managing the severely mentally ill by society. By some accounts, 20% of inmates suffer from severe mental illness, including things like schizophrenia and psychopathic disorders. By comparison, the general populace is at 6%. So like
Wow.
3.5% difference in terms
Hmm.
of the population impact. And the doctor I mentioned earlier, Dr. Tori Seppa, said that literally everyone on Earth is susceptible to severe mental illness. It's just a factor of conditions which science doesn't actually totally understand right now, for sure, as to how they can converge within a single person and eventually find themselves having a psychotic break. One thing she mentioned that was fascinating was if you are a chronic marijuana user, you are 5 times more susceptible to a psychological disorder than if you aren't. And that doesn't mean
Hmm.
that that triggers the psychosis. It means that if you have this like innate, inherited genetic precondition to it, then you are 5x more likely to have that actually manifest in your mind than if you weren't a habitual user. She also talked about dealing with people who like start doing meth, about how sometimes you can bring them back, and sometimes once you push the brain too far, it's just gone. There's no getting somebody
Yeah.
back at that point.
Yikes.
Uh, the so going from having a severe mental episode in prison to being transferred to a treatment facility is like the only hope that folks currently have that are kind of in these positions in these conditions. But even that is just lined with bureaucratic like red tape to get them across the finish line. I'll give you an
Like,
example. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, like, remember how Ed Gein loved prison?
Yeah, because he was well, because
Because he was
back then
finally
it
on
was
meds,
he
and he
was
was like,
no,
I finally feel normal.
he wasn't in a prison. He was mentally insane. He went to an asylum back when
Right,
asylums.
right. And he loved it.
Yeah, he loved it.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he was like these are my peers.
yeah. He's like, this
Um,
is great. I finally don't feel alone and weird.
yeah, yeah. I'll give you an example of like what this kind of currently looks like, and it's not a sympathetic example. Like it's not something you're gonna be like, oh, poor guy, let's like help. Like he's a horrible whatever. There's a guy named Andre Lee Thomas, and at the age of 18 years old, he went into the home of his ex-wife in March of 2004, kicked in the door, stabbed her in the chest, and then stabbed their 4 and 1 year old kids to death. Then
Yeah, but he was
removed,
18 and had a 4-year-old child and an ex-wife.
yes,
Jesus Christ.
he removed their hearts, put their organs in his pocket, and then walked home and then called his former mother-in-law saying he did a bad thing.
Wow. That is a bad
So
thing.
5 days later, while he's under arrest, this is I think this was in Dallas. It was definitely in Texas. I don't know if it was in Dallas, but I'm pretty sure it was. 5 days later, while he's under arrest, he ripped out his right eye with his bare hands. Still, he went to trial and was sentenced to death. And while on death row, he removed the other eye and ate it. And he did this, he said, to prevent the government from reading his mind. He's still on death row.
That's fair. The government would definitely have read his mind.
I mean, this is unique across the board. I looked up example after example of people who are in solitary confinement on death rows across every state, across the board, who like are obviously severely mentally ill. But like
Yeah.
we put this process in place and the system in place. We're like, just we don't want to know about them. And like frankly,
Right.
I don't want to know this guy, right? Like I'm not saying like this guy like we should like
Yeah,
put
no, I don't have anywhere
like,
else I'd rather put him, but like, yes.
exactly. I have nowhere else I'd rather
Yeah.
put him, but also from like a humanity perspective, the key thing is that there's no voting block for this. Like who's the vote? Like who is it candidate gonna like lobby for money for this? Like
Right.
there's nobody that should. I mean, there should, but there's nobody that's gonna care about this, and the outcome of that is gonna be the people that you see living on the streets screaming at themselves. It's gonna be the people that are
Hmm.
locked up in jail. Like if you get arrested for something trivial, like a DUI, which like is like usually trivial, you might be in a cell with some guy who just ripped his eyes out 5 minutes ago. Like you know,
Yeah.
like it actually does impact even us selfishly, in different ways. And so, yeah, I'm gonna go back to Ezra Klein's suggestion on finding ways to make things work. And yeah, that's kind of my ethos. Go by abundance. I haven't read it yet, but and he does not talk about any of this. It was just like a segue from his conversations about some other things. But that's my story for today.
What is like what are we supposed to do?
I mean, it requires somebody to say we're going to address this at a state or federal level.
Hmm.
And you don't want to go back to mental asylums. Like, that was fucking horrible. Like,
No, absolutely, yeah.
it's like there needs to be some other model. Like, I forgot what it's called. It's I want to say Kirkland, and then I'm wondering if I'm thinking about Costco too much. I think it's called Kirkland McBride, but there's a model of mental asylums that was developed in like the 18 like 17 1800s, and that's what all mental asylums across the world have been, and it never shifted from that. And so
Right.
maybe it's
It
time for
needs
like,
like an update.
yeah, it needs like a refresh. It needs somebody to go and be like, hey, we
Yeah.
got to find a different way to deal with these people. And so like, but then you got to commit the resources to doing it. And again, you have a voting block of people that like
Because
don't
there's
vote, can't vote, and are nuts.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like they're not going to advocate for themselves and everybody else is like fucking terrified of not being
yeah,
able to
give
eat.
me, dude. I see it all the time.
You know?
I'll walk down downtown Austin. You'll see someone screaming to themselves.
Yeah.
My inclination is not to go over there and hold their hand and say, "Hey, how can we help you?" My inclination is to get the fuck out of there. Like,
No,
I
it's
don't,
'cause
I don't blame us for being the way we are, but also it's like, it's not good.
no. No, it sounds really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
know. It's interesting. Like I feel like in the thalidomide episode, we talked about how like the kids who had it and were like disfigured, you hadn't seen disfigured people for so long because they had hid them all away.
yeah,
You know, which is so wild that there's like this is take this entire population of people and hide them from you so you can like pretend everything's fine. So like your wife is being a little hysterical, just send her away and you can pretend that everything's fine. Get a new one, you know?
dude, it's crazy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like I was saying earlier with the mental stuff, like if you had like a kid with like Down syndrome, you just drop
Hmm.
them off and like nobody would know there were people in society that had that. And now,
Right.
those people like live. I'm a huge fan of Shane Gillis, who like he's a comedian and he has family members who have Down syndrome. And
Hmm.
pretty much anytime he's on a podcast, he's talking about how happy they are and how much they love their lives and what a joy they are to be around. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like society is kind of depriving itself when we do things the way we do things.
Yeah.
So.
Totally. That's lovely that he has that in his family.
Also,
That they're
he
super.
does make a lot of jokes about people with Down syndrome, and then he also prefaces that with like also like I love them and they're my family. So like,
Yeah, there's like, but that's humanizing them,
yeah,
I think
exactly.
also in a way. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what happens. It was interesting because all this kind of dovetails with like Doge and everything else. Like Ezra, when he was on the Jon Stewart episode, he was talking about how like he's getting beaten up, being like, "You're taking their side." He's like, "I'm not taking that side." There's a difference between a party that wants government to fail and a party that doesn't care if it works. And there's something in the
Right.
middle there, which is like we should all want it to work.
Exactly.
That shouldn't be a left right issue, and people are making it such. And it's like I don't know what to tell you.
You know,
But
I find it's frustrating because I feel like the money, it's like it's all a lot of it's not all money related, right? But like, is it? I mean, I read headlines, and is it true that if the billionaires just paid their owed taxes, we could fix a lot of these problems?
he doesn't address that. What he actually does is he does this through a democratic lens, and that's why he
Right.
focuses on California and New York, because his whole point was, if I pointed to why things don't work in like Texas, for example, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
else, then the people that I'm trying to address this book to are going to look at it and say, well, Republicans are running that state and they're standing in the way. So he points to
Yeah.
those states, and he's like, or he actually one, he did one about, I think it was the Chips Act, where he was like, it was under Biden, under his administration, and he was like, if you want to bid to start getting funding for chip manufacturing in the U.S., you have to prove that you're minority owned, that you have daycare facilities for women that or
Hmm.
children. You have to prove this. You have to prove this. And he said that it like started with I think like it was like in the hundreds of companies that submitted applications, and then by the end it was like five, and none of them got funding yet because it's still kind of in the pending phase, and it's been like 4 years now. And his whole point was like that was all done on their own volition. Like nobody forced them to put all these provisions in there that made it absolutely impossible for any one organization to be able to take advantage of this and achieve the outcomes.
Hmm.
So I mean, I thought that was a really interesting. He has so many of those examples that he talks about that are just absolutely fascinating. But like again,
Yeah.
it can all be addressed if people would just stop being like, yeah, I don't know what they're being, but they need to stop it.
Yeah. I think it's like it's if you do nothing, then it's just gonna be the same things over and over again, you know? But it has to be incremental change. It just has to be because people are not gonna be able to handle it, you
And
know?
and they're gonna end up like to your question about like if billionaires pay their fair share or whatever. Like it's like I think what you end up with is more money going into a government that has more interests that are projecting onto those things that prevent stuff like what we're talking about here from happening.
Hmm.
Like I don't think it's a more money thing. I think it's a less process thing.
Well, I think everyone could always use more money. Like you could use more money. Like I wouldn't say no to money.
You wouldn't?
No. But do you think that the process is a disaster?
Yeah, yeah,
Because I don't know how to ever make it not a disaster. It just seems like it's always a disaster, you know?
yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of he refers to it as an everything bagel, which is like
Mm.
if you want to do anything in certain states, then you have to check this box, this box, this box, this box. And then by the time you're done checking the box, like site doesn't care about that thing anymore,
Hmm.
and it's already overrun in budget. And yeah, it's
And that's
just
that's all kinds of regulations too, you know? Just like
that's what
whatever.
yeah, that's what he's saying. He's saying that Democrats need to like stop running from the word deregulation because they think it only
Hmm.
applies to corporations, but it can
Hmm.
also apply to governments. Like
Yeah.
deregulate the government so it can actually become efficient and do things.
Hmm.
Um, like I was doing the math, like how many California specific data privacy restrictions would there be for somebody to kind of show up and try to reform mental health care in the state? It would take trillions of dollars in like decades to do it under current conditions. Like it's just not
Hmm.
even like who has the political capital and appetite to even try?
Right. No one.
Yeah.
So it's just gonna
So
get worse.
yeah,
Cool.
until there's an embrace of this, which I think 2028 is the year of that embrace. There, somebody asked what the Democrats' 2025 Project 2025 book would look like for
Hmm.
2029, and I forgot what congressman or senator it was, but they just like retweeted the abundance book. I was like, yeah, that is it. Like that is a strong approach to things that I think most people would get behind. So
Yeah, I want to read it. I put it on my list. I can read it in 17 weeks is when the
put on
library will give it to me.
if you want to do the easiest way possible, literally like it's like maybe like 3 days old at this point. Just go on your favorite podcast app and find the Jon Stewart Ezra Klein interview,
No, I know.
and it was amazing because Jon Stewart's involved in this stuff, right? Like he's involved in like veteran affairs and veteran
Hmm.
9/11 funding and all that kind
Of
of stuff, and so
course. God, when
he's
he
like
talks about 9/11 funding, you're like,
he really is in it, and like
he's
he
so,
talks
oh,
about attending all
yeah.
these community boards, and he's like, no, I see it, dude. I've been to these boards, and we want to do a thing, and then this person raises their hand and says, but we got to make sure we look out for this, and that person raises their hand, and all of a sudden by the end of it, you're like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Why did we all
Yeah.
come
And
here
they
today?
can't agree on anything, which is a huge problem of the left. What I feel comfortable saying.
I mean, it will only be fixed when the call is coming from inside the house.
Hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we went on a little side tangent, but that tangent's directly tied to this, since like this Ezra Klein abundance concept is exactly what informed this episode. So
Hmm.
we're still on point. I'm not gonna hear otherwise.
What should I write in my image for this episode?
I don't know if you really, I mean, if you want the episode to blow up, you could put like abundance, like
I'll do
right
that.
then, right Ezra Klein's wave.
Let's write that. I'm actually at the Airbnb and we have several surfboards, so I feel like that's fine. That makes
There you
sense.
go. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah, yeah.
Anywho, that's all I got
Anywho,
for you, Taylor.
thank you. That was super interesting. A
Yeah.
lot to think about. I'm like, I just like yesterday I did not read the news and I was like, ah. And I was like, oh, right, didn't read the news today.
Oh, the
But it,
one thing I wanted real quick, just like the reason I framed it the way I also framed it, factually, I might add, is that you said something at the start was like it's all Reagan's fault, right? I was like, it's so much more complicated.
no, of course
Like,
it is. Of course it is.
it's never it's so much easier to look at the boogeyman and say the boogeyman did it versus like the nuances of what happened
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
resulted in it, which I think people should also keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. But then in the
Any,
meantime, people's lives are like affected, you know?
yeah, yeah, of course. And they could be affected for good if people would stop trying to argue for dumb things
Mm-hmm.
that prevent good things from happening. Okay, last story. The one that he did on the toilet. So Ezra Klein's been on this mission for like years. He's from San Francisco. Or he's not from he's from Berkeley, I think, but he's lived in San Francisco. Anyways, he's been on this mission for forever. Like this is like a 4 year old podcast I listened to where he talked about the $1.7 million toilet at a park in San Francisco, and he
Mm-hmm.
went through everything that had to be accomplished before they could build it. And then the media picked up, the national media picked this up and goes attacks the assemblyman or congressman, or whoever allocated this budget for this one toilet in this one park. It's like, it has to be 1.7 million. It might be more than that. We got to do
Mm-hmm.
like 6 years of environmental reviews. It has to be every union has to get like it's like this insane process. And anyways, it's there's so many of those nuanced stories that are really fun. But again, that goes back to like if you try to appease and try to create the best possible outcome, then you'll achieve no outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't help anybody.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Anywho, I'm done. Done rant.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Super
Do we ha-
interesting.
do we have anything to sign folks off with?
Not today, but please follow us on social media. We're also on YouTube. We got a mean comment the other day, and um, then I also keep getting all these things that are like YouTube is the biggest space for podcasters, and I'm like, I don't see that. Do we have to videotape ourselves? Then we're just videotaping a conversation. And I guess that's what people want. I don't even know why I said videotape. I'm like 100 years old.
Yeah, you're definitely not getting drafted.
Dude, I was never gonna. I'm a lady.
I'm a
Me and my
lady.
lady things are not gonna get drafted. But I do remember being in college after 9/11 and some lady was like, they're gonna start the draft. And I was like, all my friends are gonna go to war, you know?
I mean, that was when I yeah, yeah, like right around 9/11 is when I had to every boy has to when they turn 18 has to do the selective service
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we all had to do that at school.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But I believe in equality, so I think that you should be in the trench next to me.
I believe in equality unless it's women and children first when I say yes, we should do that. And also, no, I'm not going to war. So, other than that though, equality, yes.
I appreciate the honesty.
Other than those two things.
Fine, I'll take the bullet.
What was it? I forget what episode it was. You're like, women and children first is bullshit. And I was like, Excuse me, it's not."
You were like you actually like let go of that for a second. You're like, you know what? You're right. That's not equal. And also, I still want it.
Yeah, no, don't like no, man. Children at least first, and then women, and then men,
Yes,
and then
fair,
people we don't like.
fair.
Yeah, and then mimes.
Poor mimes. We love you, mimes. Please keep listening.
Maybe they should go first. Then they can
Yeah,
guide everybody very calmly.
yeah. The world needs more art. Um,
We saved the mime from this disaster so that they could mime you what happened.
it's all coming together.
Uh, anyway, I'm happy to be on vacation. I hope you have an okay week.
Yeah, thanks.
Rough out there.
And yeah, anything to read out before we sign off?
Nope. Please follow us on social media at Doomed to Fail Pod, all of the places, and we have a Patreon. If you want to help us spread the word, you can sign up right now, and then in the future, you will always have ad-free episodes if we ever get ads. You know.
Yeah, please. That'll be great. Awesome. We'll go ahead and cut that off then. Thanks, Taylor.
Cool. Thanks.